people who are darker than blue. Don't let us hang around this town and let what others say come true. We're just good for nothing. They all figure a boyish grown-up shit.
Welcome to another episode of Darker Than Blue. As you just heard Curtis Mayfield remind us that we are the people who are darker than blue. And on this show, we talk about politics. For the people who are darker than blue, I am Jackie Lukman, and you are listening to Darker Than Blue on WPFW radio in Washington, D.C., 89.3 FM on your radio dial. And it is Friday, January 3rd. It is a new year. Woohoo! It's literally just a couple of days past the old year. But you know what? We were already met with just chaos at the beginning of this year. The very first day of the year, there were some attacks that were carried out that I think at first nobody thought that these things were connected, and we still don't have a whole lot of information about them being connected. But I'm sorry, y'all. There's a little bit too many coincidences involved in these two attacks for them to be coincidences. So I have a feeling that these things mean something, but what, I don't quite know. But I think we need to talk about what's going on, at least the information that we do know about these attacks. Weird. And I do feel like I have to give my disclaimer at the beginning. I am not trying to say that I have the definitive answer on whatever is going on with these. I have all of the information that you have, that we've all gotten from the corporate media. But then there are some tidbits of information within that information that we kind of glossed over, that the media kind of slid under the door a little bit, that I have been I've kind of been enjoying myself connecting the dots, because if you really look at these two horrific incidents, there are dots to be connected that I think if we don't connect them, we're going to find ourselves in a big old trick bag like we did not too long after 9/11. So let me talk about a couple of things. All right. So first of all, the death toll in New Orleans is now 15, with 30 people injured. And as I said, some things are a little weird, and they were weird from the beginning, from the very first beginning of the reporting of the incident in New Orleans, because if you recall, the media reported that the FBI claimed that there was a Black foreign terrorist organization's flag found in the truck of the person who drove into the crowd in New Orleans on Bourbon Street on New Year's morning. Now, yesterday when I did Talking Points, I called it an ISIS flag because a couple of outlets did call it an ISIS flag. And when the media says Black flag of a terrorist organization, come on, you thought it was ISIS too. Anyway, so I called it an ISIS flag because that's what a couple of the media outlets did call it. And that was the very strong suggestion. But then I kind of thought, well, that's weird. How did they just find a terrorist flag in the truck of the man? Because I want to know where you get such a thing. Now I know that there are plenty of places where you can get, a whole bunch of countries' flags, and nobody's going to think anything of it. But I gotta wonder, where do you get an ISIS flag? Where do you get a flag for Al Qaeda? Where do you get a flag for HTS, the offshoot of Al Qaeda that has been legitimized in Syria now. Where would someone order an ISIS flag from Amazon? Would you procure an ISIS flag from, say, Walmart? Would you go to terroristflagsoutlet.com for an ISIS flag? I don't think that there is such a website. I'm just saying that to hopefully raise the ridiculousness, just the level of foolishness of this idea that really did happen, that this man was just driving around with an ISIS flag. Okay. I mean, look, I could be wrong, and it could be true. I don't think it is. I'm just saying it's a little too weird, a little too convenient for me to just kind of believe it. But okay, that's what they said. But then aside from that, I was also like reading the initial accounts of the incident, and they were talking about how he was radicalized into fundamentalist Islam or whatever. And I don't really see it, but as I was reading through the narratives, I actually started thinking about the Newburgh 4 case. And if you've never heard of the Newburgh 4 case, I'm going to give you a teeny bit of information about the case. Now, I learned about the Newburgh 4 case when I did the first talking points about the Newburgh 4 case when I was co-host on By Any Means Necessary, and my talking points on that morning of 2023 was about this case. And the issue was the issue of the case was that 4 men, all Black, were convicted in 2010 of allegedly colluding to carry out terrorist acts in the United States. But the problem was they were literally set up by the FBI. They absolutely were. Prosecutors in the case said that the 4 men had spent months scouting targets and finding things to blow up and attack and all this kind of stuff, that they were, doing this, but they did it on behalf of this informant sent to them by the FBI. And this is what the attorneys for the Newburgh 4 said in court, in the trial, that these men were, quote, entrapped for their race, religion, they were, yep, and working class backgrounds by a government looking to spread fear of Muslims and justify bloated budgets, end quotes. The bloated budgets is the bloated military budgets that they're talking about. In the original trial, defense lawyers said federal informant Shahid Hussein tried to stir up the men with rhetoric, and he chose the targets. They weren't looking for the targets. He chose the targets, offered the men who were destitute and desperate. These men were practically homeless. A lot of money, bought them groceries, and provided them with fake bombs and missiles. The defense also said that Hussein himself was a self-serving manipulator who was trying to get the government to fix his problem because he had just been convicted on fraud charges that were unrelated to this case that the FBI was drumming up against these 4 men. But Hussein worked with the FBI to entrap these 4 men because he wanted the FBI to fix his stuff with the convictions for fraud that do you understand what? Okay. So then it was realized by U.S. District Judge Colleen McMahon, who in 2023, when the case was brought before appeal, said that these men were not dangerous. They were disenfranchised, destitute, and desperate men. Judge Colleen McMahon said in her ruling in 2023, ordering 3 of the 4 to be released, they were hapless, easily manipulated, and penurious petty criminals. Penurious means they were very, very freaking poor. They were caught up more than a decade ago in a scheme driven by overzealous FBI agents and a dodgy informant. The real lead conspirator in the case was the United States, she said. It was terrible that the men agreed to participate in these ridiculous plans that the government drummed up in what she said was the government's made for TV movie. But the judge added that the sentence was the product of a fictitious plot to do things that these men had never remotely contemplated and that were never going to happen, end quote. Now, why would I bring that case up in relation to what happened in New Orleans? Because I certainly do not believe that the FBI manipulated this man to drive his truck into that crowd and murder those 15 people and injure the 30 and many others that he did. I am, however, wondering about what we're being told about his extremist radicalization. That's really bothering me because that narrative feeds into something really sinister and very, very horrible. The same kind of thing that the Newberg case, the Newberg 4 case, fed into, that kind of narrative, right? So, and I really, I don't know, I was really kind of stuck on the whole flag thing, how he would get it, because I'm like, there is nothing that you or I purchase online anywhere from any retailer, I don't care who it is, that everybody does not know about. I mean, if the government wants to know what I purchased last week from Instacart, they don't even really have to ask. So I'm really like, how does one acquire such a thing without the government knowing? And I talked about it a little bit last week. Any online retailer, I don't care who they are. I don't care if they do say they don't sell their information to a third party. They don't sell your personal information to the third party. But if the government wants to know what you purchased, they will know. It's not even a question anymore. I don't know why we don't understand how the government works in relation to not just social media outlets, but everything electronic. You know, the internet doesn't belong to us. It was a Department of Defense asset from the beginning, and it is still a Department of Defense asset. So everything we do on the internet is absolutely tracked by the entity that created and owns it. Well, not created, but owns it now. All right. So, you know, I talked about that a little bit earlier in the week in another talking point. Like, okay, so wouldn't the army, because the person who carried out this attack in New Orleans was a member of the U.S. Army? Yeah, he was a member of the U.S. Army. And he did active duty service, and he also did Army Reserve. So this man was trained to stalk, cause destruction, maim, and kill by the U.S. military. And that skill was used obviously in the U.S. military, and now it's been used against citizens. Why? I really want to know why. And I think that the problem I'm having is that the narrative of terrorist radicalization, it's too easy for me. It's too easy, and it's very cynical for the time we are in. It's too easy because I get that there's stuff they say they found, and then they talk about he posted videos on his social media account of declaring his allegiance or his support for ISIS. But those videos were posted literally hours before he got in that truck and did what he did. And for me, that's just, I don't know. I just expect people, and maybe that's my problem. Maybe my problem is my expectations, but I'm saying, the reason I do what I do is because I'm not afraid to say things and ask questions that y'all are thinking and are afraid to ask because you don't want people to call you stupid. I get called stupid all the time. So even when I'm right, So I am not afraid to ask the questions that you are afraid to ask, because you know none of this looks, feels, sounds right to you either. So I just figured, why not just talk about it? So this man did active duty service in the Army. He served on active duty in human resources and information technology when he was deployed to Afghanistan from 2009 to 2010. He transferred to the Army Reserves in 2015 and left in 2020 as a staff sergeant. Now, look, a year in Afghanistan will open one's eyes to the hypocrisy of US foreign policy and the realities of imperialism and the realities of what the US military really does around the world. And it's not bringing democracy, peace, and protecting women. I fully believe that a year in Afghanistan will change people's perspective. And I know that is true because I know a couple people who came out of the military and joined veteran peace organizations because of what they saw in Afghanistan or because of what they saw in Iraq, right? So I'm certainly not disputing the possibility, the potentiality. And again, got to give a little disclaimer. I am just entertaining all kinds of possibilities and making connections where I see them. I'm not declaring anything. I'm just looking at this and saying, somebody ain't telling all of us everything. Okay, so yeah, I think it's possible that this man served a tour in Afghanistan and saw things that may have messed him up. Entirely possible. However, there is some more information that causes me to wonder if this could be something else and not the narrative that the media and the government are trying to push with this incident. Because Shamsuddin Jabbar, this is the person who carried out the attack in New Orleans, grew up in Texas, so he's a citizen. So all this. Ooh, he was radicalized by the fundamentalist Islam. He's not. He's a citizen. So okay, so I know some people were thinking that when they heard about the flag and they heard his last name, they're like, oh, he's one of those immigrants. He's not. All right. He started a real estate business and made $120,000 a year for one of the world's largest consulting firms. Court records show that he was making about $10,000 a month. A month. If I made $10,000 in 1 month, y'all would not see or hear from me for 30 days until that money ran out, and that money would not run out in 30 days. Let me tell you. You understand? But $10,000 a month doing business development and other work for the consulting firm Deloitte in 2022. But the 42-year-old US citizen finalized a third divorce in 2022 also. Jabbar said he was $27,000 behind on house payments. $27,000 behind in his mortgage. So that meant now because he had been divorced several times, I don't know which house payments we're talking about. I don't know if we're talking about the house payments on his mortgage or the house payments on his ex-wife's mortgages, because I don't know. We don't know if he is paying the mortgage on the ex-wives' homes as well as his. We don't know, but he is $27,000 behind in house payments. That's what CNN reported. That's their words. And I don't know how much that mortgage is, but $27,000 behind in mortgage payments is, we are literally in the car on the way with the bolt cutters, some new locks, and the U.S. Marshals to seize that house. This man was facing foreclosure and homelessness. $27,000 behind in mortgage payments. That's wild. And making $10,000 a month. But there is more. One business, Blue Meadow Blue Meadow Properties, LLC, lost about $28,000 in 2021. So his businesses were failing and he was hemorrhaging money, hemorrhaging money. Two other business he started weren't worth anything, were not successful. He also had accumulated $16,000 in credit card debt because of expenses like attorney's fees. And he was barred from seeing two of his daughters that he had with one of his ex-wives. Y'all, all of the stuff about the flag, whether it was a copy, whether it was upside down, whether all of that other stuff, notwithstanding, and I'm not dismissing it. I'm not saying it's not, I'm just saying this right here, the financial stuff, this man's life had fallen apart in the most spectacularly capitalist way possible. And I don't know, I'm feeling like this is enormous in regard to contributing factors to this mass murder that he committed. And I'm not saying that the so-called evidence of a potential radicalization by Islamic terrorists. I'm not. You know what? Yes, I am saying that's garbage. Yes, I am. I am saying that's garbage. Come on. I am not saying that he didn't print out an ISIS flag. That would have been kind of. I'm not saying that he didn't, but as I look at this man's financial situation, the material realities that he was dealing with, I don't think this is as much of a domestic terrorist kind of situation. At least not owing to radical Islam, which is what the media and the government wants to make this. And if he did put these items on his social media hours before he goes out and gets in his truck and does this heinous thing, if he did print out this flag and put it in his truck and put it, okay, yeah, he did that to misdirect people. He did that as a deflection. And I'm not sure what kind of support or treatment he did or did not get from his service in the military and from the things that he had been going through. We know that the U.S. military is notoriously unconcerned about the well-being of their soldiers when they come back from the theaters of war that they deploy them to. And in places like Afghanistan and Iraq, this has been true throughout the history of American militarism. But haven't we seen it so much worse in the modern era of the forever wars? Because while the US government and military has committed atrocities all over the world for decades, centuries, it's really been centuries. And I don't want people to misunderstand what I'm saying, because I'm not giving the government any props or the military any props. But there was not an endless kind of relentless, never ending, 1 month after another, 1 year after another, one conflict into another. There was a little bit of space in between the invasions and the coups. There was a year or two in between the push for imperialism into a new country. Up until, I want to say, and I don't know that I can pinpoint a particular period where I can say with absolute definitive accuracy that, yes, this is the period, the time in which the US government decided, it's imperialism 24/7, 365. It's everything we do. We just going to be pushing it around the world with the military. I don't know when that began, where it was a never-ending war footing that the US military through the government adopted. But I really do believe that Wesley Clark, former General Wesley Clark, really gave us a big old insight into when that might have occurred. because he talked about around 1999, 1998, the late 90s, being told that the Department of Defense had a plan to coup 7 countries in 5 years. Mm-hmm. We talked about this a little bit not too long ago. And those 7 countries, let me see if I can get them. Let me see if I get them right, because I always mess it up. I always forget one. Those 7 countries were Iran, Iraq, Lebanon, Libya, Sudan, Somalia, and Syria. In the late 90s, the United States government, and this is what Wesley Clark says, it's not what I say, because I don't think anybody was couped in the US government. This is just the US government. But Clark says in a video that from 2003, where he makes this announcement where he tells people when he heard this and who he heard it from, he says that these people like Wolfowitz and what's his name, Brzezinski, Mika's daddy. Yeah, the co-host of Morning Joe, her daddy was the former. That the neocons cooed the Department of Defense and the U.S. government. They didn't coup anybody in the government. They didn't coup George Bush. He made that argument because Bush, if you remember, and I do remember Bush campaigning on this compassionate conservatism, right? That conservatism has gotten a bad name, and we conservatives need to do better with being nice to people. So I am advocating for, I'm not going to not be a conservative, George Bush said. I don't know what the devil conservatives are conserving other than white supremacist, pan-European, settler colonial hegemony in this country. But anyway, so he said he advocated for, he was campaigning on compassionate conservatism. Now listen, if you have to put the word compassionate in front of the thing that describes you, then without that word, you are not compassionate. And you know it. That's why you have to add the word compassionate. But regardless of how ridiculous it sounded, and I remember saying to people, if conservatives were compassionate, they wouldn't need to put the word compassionate in front of their title. Why are you people believing this man? But people did, and especially the church folks, the Black Christians. Ooh, we loved ourselves some George Bush, because that man gave mega churches money, and that is the point at which a lot of Black mega churches stepped away from saying anything political, because they were taking money from the Bush administration and his faith-based initiatives program. Ooh, that's a whole nother 2-3 shows just talking about that. But that period of time when George Bush ran for president and he was peddling that compassionate conservatism foolishness, when he was campaigning on scaling back U.S. military involvement in other countries. Because, he talked about how, yes, the U.S. has been the policeman of the world and we don't need to be because nobody asked us to be. And sometimes we haven't done the right, never actually, admitting we're a bunch of imperialist genocidaires. We steal people's stuff and we oppress people for free and forced labor because we're settler colonists, just like the Israelis. They're never going to say that. Never going to say that, but that we know that's what it is. But Bush campaigned on this idea that his conservative Republican presidency would be more compassionate than other Republican presidencies. And yeah, it wasn't, because according to Wesley Clark, because people still want to give Daddy Bush all this credit for being a nice guy and not as bad as the other people, like people needed to give Jimmy Carter credit for. I got to wait till next week to talk about that. Good grief. But no, Wesley Clark is saying that these people who took over the government, basically they cooed Bush, because this was not what Bush wanted. And they did the exact opposite. Oh, please. George Bush was completely happy with this invading 7, not just invading, cooing and destroying the governments of 7 countries in 5 years. Now, with a mandate like that, and it didn't get done in the first 5 years that the plan was implemented. Didn't it get done in the second 5 years that the plan was implemented? So you know they just kept trying. And we are sure that they just kept trying because they just succeeded in Libya. So the endless wars to carry out this plan of cooing and destroying the governments of 7 countries, that's a part of this endless war paradigm that existed, that came to fore in the modern era, I would argue, under George Bush the first. And a part of that endless war paradigm was also the global war on terror. Right? So we all know and understand very well that the United States military is very, very good at sowing chaos, destruction, and death around the world, carrying out endless wars, taking all our money. They got our healthcare money, they got our student loan money, they got our housing money, they got our environmental money, they have our social security money. They are great at taking our money, losing trillions of dollars of it, and then using the rest of it to bomb people who look like us around the world for their resources. But the same military and the same US government is horrible at taking care of the people they send into these theaters. I'm not even going to call them theaters of war. They are theaters of imperialist aggression. They are theaters of imperialist, of Yankee gangsterism. And these people go into these countries like Afghanistan and carry out the insane, inhumane, awful, degrading, disgusting, murderous policies of the US military and the US government. These people see things that I am sure impact them mentally in the worst ways. And then when they come back here, what kind of mental health support do they get? The kind that causes a lot of veterans to end up homeless and suffering from substance abuse disorder. They don't get the kind of mental health help that they need. So it is entirely possible that whatever was going on in Jabbar's life, it's entirely possible that all of these other things that were these things that were discovered in the beginning of the incident that they were reporting on that seemed a little strange, maybe he did throw that in there because he has an anger toward the US government. But maybe that anger toward the government might be about the lack of support he received from them to deal with everything that he was going through after he gave his service to this government and had to be exposed to the things that he probably saw in Afghanistan that he didn't want to see. I don't know. I'm just looking at this and I'm like, man, how come I can sit here and ask these questions that I'm sure everybody is asking? Well, most people who think and who already know how much the government lies, right? I'm hoping that I am not the only person asking these questions, because I hope people do not believe what the media is saying, because what they are telling us is not, and the way they're telling us some of this stuff is not adding up. But we have to take a little station break right now. So our engineer, I'm sure, has queued up a fantastic promo. So let's get to that. And I don't know. There we go.
Happy New Year. This is Miyuki, Interim General Manager. As we close out this incredible 2024, we want to take a moment to thank you, Your support, passion, and belief in WPFW's mission have made 2024 possible. You sustain WPFW, you help fortify WPFW from malicious unknowns, and you ensure WPFW could transition to a new studio where broadcasting has been uninterrupted. Together, we've celebrated the music and the stories. Together, we've presented the voices often unheard and have provided much needed insights. Here's to you, our listeners, volunteers, and supporters for making this all possible. Thank you from all of us at WPFW. Together, we will build a better world, one broadcast at a time.
Absolutely. And I really love that we were able to broadcast during an end of the year fund drive, during a move from one studio location to another, and did not stop a broadcast. And we are so proud to have been able to do that. And really just excited to be in a new location and just really entering this new year with WPFW, with all of you wonderful listeners and all of you wonderful comrades over on YouTube watching. Really excited for what we have done and even more excited for what we will do. And before I forget, I want to make sure I let you know that after this show ends, please stick around and listen to News Views with Garland Nixon from 6 to 7. And then after that, WPFW does one of the things that I love and respect the most, and that is present to you not just all of these different political perspectives, but also the myriad genres of music and wonderful music, good music, real artists' music, musicians' music, and music for people who love music. Because after News Views, you should be kicking off your shoes and getting your glass of wine, listening to Robin's Place with Robin Holden. Then you should listen to Meeting in the Ladies' Room with three dope lady DJs, DJ Abby, DJ Rita Burns, and DJ Housecat. And then after that, it's back to Paradise with Byron B. Note Brown and Derek D. Train Coleman. I love Friday night music on WPFW. And then I get up the next day and then I listen to Don't Forget the Blues and all of the hip hop shows that WPFW is as well known for its fantastic music presentation as it is for its public affairs and social and political programming. And I am so glad that we are a part of it. So listen, let's get to the rest of this story because it is, of course, not over. And there are more questions. I have so many questions. But okay, since we did talk about Afghanistan a lot with Jabbar, do you also realize that Afghanistan, and there are some other connections between the other attack that happened in Las Vegas? It's true. Let me tell you how really quickly. Matthew Allen Livelsberger, who was 37, from Colorado, died in the incident on New Year's Day in Las Vegas, injured 7 others when he blew up a Tesla Cybertruck outside of the Trump International Hotel in Las Vegas. Law enforcement officials are still trying to figure out why he did this. They don't know. And they're really perplexed because the details about this man are very interesting. So despite the explosion happening outside of a Trump property and in a Tesla, Livelsberger, according to his family and friends, was a big fan of Trump. They don't think he had any animosity toward Elon Musk, although I think we all should have animosity toward Elon. But anyway, okay, so according to friends and family, he didn't have he was politically aligned with Trump and Musk. So even though he was not affiliated with a political party, according to the Colorado Secretary of State voter registration database, hold on. So he wasn't even registered to vote. And we got to deal with these people every doggone 4 years beating us over the head about voting for, and you got people in the military ain't even registered, but you need to go beat them up first if they're not registered. Okay, I digress. Let me go back to, so he wasn't registered to, or at least he was not affiliated with a political party in Colorado. He was an active duty U.S. Army Green Beret. So he wasn't just a dude. He wasn't just, what is it? Infantry. He wasn't just a grunt. All right. He was on leave from his base in Germany at the time of the blast. And the blast was carried out with a combination of fireworks, gas tanks, and camping fuel in the bed of the vehicle that was detonated. Now, this is very important. I missed it the first time I read it. I absolutely missed it the first time I read it. They were detonated by a device controlled by the driver. Let me read it again. A combination of fireworks, gas tanks, and camping fuel in the bed of the vehicle detonated by a device controlled by the driver, sources told CNN. CNN reported this. According to law enforcement, he died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound in the driver's seat shortly before the explosive in the trunk of the Tesla detonated. Only the driver could detonate the device. But the driver shot and killed himself before he could detonate the device. But the device detonated after he died. And is it me? Or does that not make sense? Now, again, I could be wrong. I could be reading something wrong in here, even though I have read this now 10 times. I counted. I could be wrong. This could be a simple issue of a writer not writing facts well. This could be a proofreading, a proofer just missed this and didn't ask the question, wait, how could this be? This doesn't make sense. Could be. But as this is reported, this doesn't make sense. And you know what this reminds me of? Everything reminds me of something else that doesn't make sense. You know what this reminds me of? Gary Webb. You need to go look that up. So, the other things that the two have in common, and even CNN admitted that the Las Vegas explosion and the deadly attack in New Orleans do have some striking similarities. Like both of the subjects served at Fort Bragg. Now, Fort Bragg is called Fort Liberty now, and you're going to have to look up Fort Bragg and who the base was named after to understand why they had to change the name of that base after all this time. But both of them served at Fort Bragg. Now, the media makes it clear that they don't know if they served at the same time at Fort Bragg or in the same unit. They're sure they didn't serve in the same unit. They don't know if they served there at the same time. Fort Bragg, well, Fort Liberty. It's called Fort Liberty now. Fort Liberty is an enormous military base. Enormous. All right. So is it possible they were there at the same time and didn't have any connection with each other? It's entirely possible. Yeah, it's possible. But I think it's more than a coinkydink that both of these people who committed violent attacks on the same day in different places in the country, completely different places, not anywhere near the same state, not even on the same side of the country. They both served at Fort Bragg, and they're both in the Army. They both served at Fort Bragg. Okay, if it was just that, I wouldn't be talking about this. But it's not just that. There is also the fact that both men served in Afghanistan in 2009, the same year. Though, again, the media makes it clear that there are no indications they served in the same unit or province. But again, I don't care. I don't care if they didn't serve together physically, side by side together, and they were in the same country at the same time for the same reason. And what was the reason? Obama's recommitment to the mission in Afghanistan. And what was the mission in Afghanistan? The global war on terror that did not stop terrorism, because that's what the global war on terror was supposed to do. It was supposed to solve terrorism and make the world safer from terrorism. And what it did instead was to increase terrorism by at least 1,000%. Yeah, that's why they were in Afghanistan. Oh, and then the other part, the other thing, the other commonality that I almost missed, both of these people who both served at Fort Bragg, both deployed in Afghanistan in 2009, in the same year, at the same time, both in the Army, one former Army, one current active duty Army. Both of them, one had I think they just described it as a truck. So I'm guessing it's a pickup truck, And the other had a Tesla Cybertruck. But one attack happens in Las Vegas, Nevada. The other attack happens in New Orleans, Louisiana. But both of them rented their vehicles from the same company, a company called Turo, Turo. I've never heard of that company. I don't know. Maybe it's something that only military members get offered. I don't know, but I'm sorry. That is too. We've got what, 3, 4 coincidences now? I'm sorry. I apologize for what I'm about to say. Something is a coincidence when there's only one thing that you can't explain that is a similar. I only accept a one thing that can be a coincidence. 3, 4 things, that's not a coincidence. I'm sorry, it's not. So I am very suspicious about not about what was done, because it's obvious that these men did what they did. I am absolutely not sitting here saying, no, they didn't do it, or, oh, this is a false flag, or, oh, no, this is a setup. This isn't written. Oh, goodness gracious. No, these men did what they did. They committed these acts. Jabbar killed those 15 people and injured those 30 others. He drove that truck into those people, knowing full well that he was going to kill people. Livisberger got in that car, put that stuff in that car with the intention of detonating the materials in that car. Now, whether he intended to hurt anybody else, I don't know. And I understand that he did leave a note or a message behind saying that he was basically, he was deeply grieved for what he had done in the military. So I'm not at all taking away from these people what they have done. I am not suggesting that somebody else did these things. What I am saying is that very quickly, the media tried to shape the incident in New Orleans as a domestic terror incident that was akin to the people the government is fighting in Syria and in Gaza, because they're all terrorists in Gaza, and they might as well be ISIS as far as the U.S. government and the media is concerned. the people that the military is fighting in places like Somalia, in places like Sudan, in places like Syria. Well, those people are now influencing members of the military here in the United States. And that's why this man did what he did in New Orleans. That's the narrative that the media pushed out on January 1st and 2nd. And then what happened in Las Vegas happened. And then they kind of had to backtrack on like, wait a minute, wait, oh. And then they had to kind of downplay the connections that these two men had, because those connections kind of throw that narrative they started with away. Especially when you dig into the other issues that Jabbar was dealing with in his life, and you look at the situation with Livisberger and what he said about why he took his own life in the way that he did. So I am sure there is going to be so much more, so much more coming out about these incidents that we don't know, that I don't have right, that I'm going to have to come back and say, you know what, I was wrong about that, because this is what cool, fine. But I think this, looking at things that happen, analyzing the media and what they say about these things that happen, and then analyzing what the media says. That's what this is to me. This is an analysis of what the media tells us about what goes on domestically and in the world. Not about whether these two men did what they did. Yes, they did. Yeah, they did. But what has the media been telling you about it? They've been trying to get you all riled up again about domestic, fundamentalist extremist terrorism, so that you can consent to the kind of continued repression of our Muslim and our Arab brothers and sisters, the surveillance of their mosques, the interrogation and the rounding up of Muslims and Arabs that we saw after 9/11, that narrative is still used, just like it was used with the Newburgh 4, just like it has been used in other instances to get people to be okay with repression of Muslims and Arabs. Because look at the moment this country is in. Nobody in this country, well, I'm sure there are some people in this country who love the militarism that this country is going on. Oh, you've got you've got Luigi Mangione, and nobody's mad at Luigi but the government and the CEOs. You've got a country of 330 million people, and at least 150 million of those people are angry at this government because of the very things that we're talking about right now. The endless wars, the appropriation, the theft of our money for those endless wars, where this government tells us we can't have things that we deserve because we're human beings, like healthcare, housing, education, clean environment, leisure time, you know, the things that human beings deserve to have because we're human. The narrative about these incidents was being used to prop up another expansion of the global war on terror domestically and abroad, that they're still doing, but they need the buy-in and consent from the American public, because the American public is turning on the government. That's what I think. That's how I see it. Again, look, next week I might be on here talking about, okay, I was wrong about that. But that's how I see it this week. And I want to leave you with this, with the last minute or so that we have. I told you we're going to talk about some incidents in history, and we are. And I really want to talk about this. January 1, 1863, the Emancipation Proclamation. The Emancipation Proclamation took effect on January 1, 1863. Who did it emancipate and who gets credited? Well, Bill Bigelow wrote for the Zen Education Project, If We Knew Our History, in the Rethinking Lincoln column. He said, with rare exceptions, like the American Social History Project Center for Media and Learning, a City University of New York's fine Freedom Unfinished Revolution, middle and high school textbooks fail to credit the real anti-slavery heroes in the story, the enslaved themselves. So let me, so there is an aspect of this, this history of the Emancipation Proclamation that we don't quite know. And that is the fact that in the Emancipation Proclamation, there is language that Lincoln put in there that laid out which enslaved people in which states would be freed and which ones would not, as if the proclamation was never issued. Those words, as if this proclamation were never issued, are literally in the proclamation, in the section where it declares which states the proclamation does not apply to. And I do not mean, Yipper, that it wasn't Lincoln. I mean that it was Lincoln who did it. So the idea that the Emancipation Proclamation was Lincoln's great love letter to the Africans, please stop. Please stop. Stop it. In 2025, stop believing that. Stop saying that. Stop saying Lincoln freed the slaves, because he wrote in that proclamation that there are some people who are enslaved in states that are not rebellious to the Union. In the good state, or in the good states that are a part of the Union that have slaves, they can stay slaves as if this proclamation were never issued. But in the rebellious states, in the Confederate states, those people who are enslaved are now not enslaved. So can we please stop saying that Lincoln freed the slaves, because even he said he didn't. And that's my time for Darker Than Blue this week. Join us next week for another fantastic show. Peace if you're willing to fight for it. Peace.